This conference will now be recorded.
All right, Karen, how am I looking?
I still see your GoToMeeting. Oh, there, it's gone now. It's good.
Okay. Okay, so this is we were working on how to kind of communicate to the lion's share of our customers what Dynamics 365 was and how is it compared to Dynamics GP. Kind of show you both of those things so you can kind of say, kind of demystifies what this program is. I'm sure we're all hearing a lot about it. So yeah, the purpose of this series is to kind of go through that and show you, kind of break it up into functional areas. So this first section, or this first lunch and learn, is about just the financial section. We're going to look at, how the journals work in both Dynamics GP and also Business Central, BC. Karen will be the first person to demo. She'll show some stuff for Dynamics GP. Then I'll do the BC stuff. The main difference between these two applications, from a functional standpoint, they do largely the same the same transactions, same results of what an ERP piece of software is. But the main difference is really on the technical platform. The technical platform is very different from Dynamics GP than it is for Business Central. Dynamics GP is an on-premise application that uses traditional client-server relationship, whereas Business Central is a fully SaaS software. It's totally in the cloud. It doesn't require any servers. It's all on a subscription basis. So that's the real value of a Business Central. Is you're not paying for servers anymore. You're easing the burden on the IT staff. All of the things around the infrastructure themselves. Plus, in addition to that, the application is all governed by Microsoft. So when the application is updated, it is updated almost unbeknownst to the client. Like you can kind of control when it happens, but you don't really have to prepare anything. It happens literally overnight. Like you go in on Tuesday night at, let's say, midnight, the application is upgraded, and on Wednesday morning you come in, it's business as usual, just on version 18 rather than version 17, or that kind of thing. It happens kind of automatically. So that's a big difference from Dynamics GP. But the main difference is that technological platform that it rides on. Okay, so let's look at what are we going to go over when it comes to to GP. So in GP, we're going to look at what a journal entry, the journal transaction entry window looks like, how you navigate it, how you can paste some information into the lines, and then what an edit list looks like, and how you would post a transaction. And these are things that you should feel very comfortable with and look very normal. And the reason why we're kind of setting it up that way is when we get to BC, it kind of says, hey, this is how it works in GP, this is how it's going to work in BC. So we'll do the same thing in BC. We'll show you a little bit about the navigation, show you how you can import data into the journal window, what the post looks, what the edit list or the post preview looks like, and also just say, talk a little bit about approval processes. There's a very simple built-in approval process for Business Central transaction entry around the journal. So we're going to get right into the demo because I only have another couple slides in this whole deck.
Okay, I got the easy part here because everybody knows what I'm showing you right here. You probably know it better than I do in a lot of cases, and that is to do a regular journal entry. So if we're navigating through the main module screens, we just go to journal entry or general. Okay, pretty much everything is batch driven here. And we have our transaction date, our reference, the 2 new user-defined fields, which are optional. And then you enter your account numbers with your debit and credit amounts and so forth. Okay. And then you save the transaction to the batch. Okay. As far as pasting journal entries, everybody probably knows how to do that too. Okay, we can put our batch ID in, a reference, and then as long as you have an Excel spreadsheet formatted in the proper way with all the proper columns, and you just copy that and come over to your journal entry and paste it into the journal entry. And as long as everything is valid, there's no invalid account numbers, you're in balance, it's going to import correctly. And then, of course, we have our save. And then printing the edit list for the batch, either from that particular window we were in or coming into the batch here. Print your edit list to make sure that there's no error messages popping up, that the fiscal period's closed or anything like that. We have the Word documents turned on. And then, of course, just posting the transaction. Okay, so is there anything I showed you that isn't a typical thing that you use every day?
If it's something that's more than that, we would already have to have prepared basically the smart list anyway.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
It's also good for like, you know, if you were doing any kind of recurring batches, it's another way to do a recurring batch in some ways. You just have it all in a spreadsheet. Somebody goes in, changes the amounts, and, you know, pastes that new journal entry in next month.
yeah, we usually just do those in Smart Connect,
Yeah, yes.
but this seems like another option.
Yeah,
Okay.
and it's like you said, it's a quick thing, and it's something anybody can do without having to, you know, write a new or have to worry about, oh, I don't know how to get into Smart Connect or whatever.
Okay, good to know.
Okay, so I'm gonna flip the story here and now show you what Business Central looks like. So here is the home page of Business Central. You notice across the top, it's kind of similar to GP in the fact that it's got like financial area sections. So for example, if you want to do something with finance, these are certain things that are financial windows, transactions that you can enter, cash, sales, purchasing. Very similar to how GP has orientated those functional areas that kind of capture the screens that you need to enter and do things in those areas. So we're going to go into the journal because that's what really this Lunch and Learn is about. It's looking at comparing both the GP journal to the BC journal. So this is let me just go back to that for 1 second. So this is basically the same thing as a batch of journal entries, right? So just like you'd kind of see in GP, except I'm going to go into one of these now and just kind of look at it. So here's a particular transaction where the batch name is equal to test. And I'm going to show you, I'm going to first start out with how this works with kind of that same kind of pasting functionality. So I already have this set to go, so I'm just going to refresh this. So a little different than how we do it in GP. Like this is I have a dynamic connection between my Excel file and the BC application. So you see here that I have this journal entry. It's for $1,500, and if I come over here, it's for $1,500. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make just a quick edit to this, and then I'm going to publish that back into BC. And you see here in this lower right hand corner, it's saying publishing. And I'm just going to come over back in here now and just refresh this. And you'll see that it's now has the updated information. Now let's get into this window a little bit so we can kind of see what are we really looking at, right? So, you know, a lot of the information is very similar to what we see in GP. It's asking us, you know, don't worry so much about this account type stuff. I'm going to talk about that in just a second. Transaction information is very similar to distribution reference, an account, an amount. It'll bring the account name, and then you have some other. This is description information, and so is this. It's just extra description information. And then there's some other fields out here that you're probably not all that familiar with, but that can be used in BC for something called dimensions, which I'm not really going to get into that, but it's a part of the Business Central application. But you know, really, it's a journal entry window, and it should look very similar to what you're used to in GP. You know, a lot of the stuff that we see about like posting, preview posting is the same thing as you would expect with like a batch edit list. So you can basically say, well, what's the entry going to look like when I post it? And it'll bring up this window and say, okay, it's going to do this, it's going to debit this, it's going to credit that, just like that. It should look, you know, it should look real similar to what you're used to in GP. You know, you can delete a line if you wanted to by clicking here and saying, you know, delete line. You can start a new transaction by coming down here. You can actually make another transaction. So you could be putting you have multiple transactions in the same batch, all in the same window. Or you could set it up where you would go to like a new window and start another transaction in this batch, which that's very similar to what we're used to in Dynamics GP. So let me show you. I'm just going to hit this page button. I'm going to hit this button, show fewer columns. And when I show fewer columns, it now puts like the document number in the header and the posting date and a bunch of information that was at the line level is now segregated between the header and the line. Whereas when I had the multiple columns, let's go back to the page and say show more columns. You put all your transactions into the one scrolling grid down below, which means you could really simply paste in a bunch of transactions similar to what you're doing with Smart Connect. You know, it could be 30 lines long, and then the next one could be another 30 line long, 10 lines long, and the next one could be 20 lines long. It could all be pasted right in from Excel. You know, very similar type of functionality. Yeah, so I really just wanted to kind of show what this window looks like. It shouldn't look like, I mean, it looks different, but you could see how you're accomplishing the same goal and you're, you know, putting values in different accounts. It should look relatively similar. It's not exactly the same, but it's very similar. One of the things I want to point out about Business Central, which is, you know, the first little section was how it's really similar to GP. And this second thing is how I just wanted to show you how the financial journal is different than GP, right? So what my example here is, I'm in this batch called default, and I can record it at the journal, which is definitely different than GP. I can record a vendor's invoice at the journal level. I can record a payment at the journal level to a particular vendor, right? So account, instead of account meaning GL account, when I tell it my account type is vendor, it then gives me the lookup of all the vendors rather than all the accounts. So that's definitely different than what you used to see in GP. And here you have, I'm recording this particular transaction for this particular vendor, and the name of my vendor is called AR Day Property Management. And then, whatever the invoice is for, I could put in. I could put the invoice number here, just like you would in a. And this this is not the only place to enter a vendor's invoice. I'm just kind of explaining to you that this can also be done in the financial journal, which doesn't happen in GP. So there is a whole section on purchasing and recording vendors' invoices through the purchasing module, and it looks more like a place you'd enter vouchers, but this is at the journal level. You could also enter a vendor's invoice is really what I'm trying to get at here. Inside of Business Central, there is something called approvals. It's built right into the screen. And, one of the things that is really great about Business Central is it's tied into your Office 365 account, right? So let's say that you wanted to do some kind of approval process that when you're going to post an entry, it has to go through some level of approval. And I'm not really describing what level that approval is, just to kind of describe that you can do this. You can set up an approval process that automatically can send, if you want, via email or inside the application, to say, hey, so-and-so has prepared this entry to be posted. Can you approve it so they can go back and post it? So while this functionality does exist at some level in GP, it doesn't implement itself very easily. Whereas this is, this inside of BC, they really streamlined this process for implementation. And it doesn't, because everything's happening here in the cloud, you're not really getting your IT people involved in how to do this. It's all baked into the application. It's all kind of thought out ahead of time. And you don't get involved with security problems and lots of things that happen when you need to open up a particular server to communicate to your mail system. It just kind of streamlines and simplifies that process so it can happen and make it easy for the end user to do these type of things.